I am not teaching, I am publicly learning. But hi and welcome to Learning for the Life in the UK test part 133, the Second World War part 3, while doing leg stretching. And if you participate in the leg stretching, it is at your own risk. And this is about war and the Second World War, what we're talking about. Let's start with the leg stretching. We're bringing one leg in front with the heel onto the ground, and we're pulling the toes towards us. And from time to time, we're contracting the quad muscles and then releasing again. So we're starting with contracting the quad muscles. So there was first the interwar period, and just what we had. And there was a great repression, and there was mass unemployment. Many people did not find work, and with poverty increased. That happened in the United States, in the United Kingdom, and also in Germany. And in Germany in 1933, we are releasing a contraction, someone came to the power. His name was Adolf Hitler, and he promised to solve this mass employment, and also he believed that the conditions imposed on Germany by the Allies after the First World War were unfair. So he did not want that Germany has the guilt for the First World War, and he wanted to conquer more land, to have more territory, because he thought the German people were superior to the others, and he wanted to erase many people off the planet, and he wanted to conquer the whole world. And in the 1930s, contract again, Germany had built up its military power very much. Then did Hitler invade Poland in 1939, and then Britain and France declared a war on Hitler because they wanted to stop him from occupying or attacking, invading and leading a war. In the case of Poland, then wanted to stop him. First, Britain hoped that they could avoid a war, but it was unavoidable. And we're releasing the contraction for last time. And then Hitler occupied Austria and also invaded the Czechoslovakia, and then Belgium and the Netherlands. And we're contracting last time the quad muscles. And in 1940, the British Prime Minister became Winston Churchill, and he was the person commanding the British troops. So a very important person of the Second World War is Winston Churchill. And we're switching the other leg in front with the heel into the ground, and we're putting the toes towards us, and we're contracting the quad muscles. When France fell, so the German army won over the French army, 300,000 soldiers were retreating, and they were trapped at the east of France. So they were retreating from the center of France. I don't know exactly what battles happened, but they were retreating, and they were trapped at the beach of France. And release the contraction again, hundreds of thousands of civilians also sailed from Britain. I think they had the first motorboats, but they sailed over to Dunkirk. There was the beach of Dunkirk, and they evacuated 300,000 people and contract again, and they saved 300,000 soldiers alive. And that gave a rise to a phrase which is known as the Dunkirk spirit. So that was a very hopeful thing happening to many people. So there we were. And release the contraction for last time. From the end of June 1940 until the German invasion of the Soviet Union in June 1941, Britain and the Empire stood almost alone against Nazi Germany. And contract again. Are we going to talk? Yes, we're going to talk about the Battle of Britain. So then I don't have to, because that would be now necessary to explain at that point. From the end of June 1940 until the German invasion of the Soviet Union in 1941, Britain and the British Empire stood almost alone against Nazi Germany. What we mean is, the leg on the outside, and the torso pointing forward, and we're driving the leg a bit into the ground. But the Soviet Union was together with the Nazi Germany attacking Poland. The Soviet Union was, in the first 2 years of the wars, at the side of Germany, and also Japan. So in the first 2 years of the Second World War, the Soviet Union was at the sides of the axis of power. Of Nazi Germany, Fascist Italy, and the Imperial Japan. And the United States hadn't entered into the war at that point. France had fallen, Belgium had fallen, Netherlands had fallen, Switzerland more or less had a neutral position. Austria was annexed, Denmark was more or less annexed in a way. I think it was Sweden had more or less a neutral position. Let's relate like that there. So it's really so stretched the leg would give a leg. In Finland was a heavy war, but Germany won it more or less. And Italy was on the side. Spain was more or less also on Hitler's side, I think, but they were not that much in. Greek was occupied, and north parts of Africa, in Libya, in Algeria, were occupied. But because that is not that mention, I want to mention there was in many areas often resistance. They were not completely controlled these areas. Nazi Germany did not. They defeated the countries, but they did not establish complete control over all territories. In Poland, there were oftentimes uprisings, but in France, for example, there were the whole time resistance. During the whole time of the Second World War, there were many areas which Germany never really controlled, and there was always resistance. They were having a leg at the outside, and they were pressing it again into the crowd. So the United States had not entered into the war. France had fallen, and the others which they named were, yes, also Canada had not fallen. But so there were a few more, but more or less Britain was alone from June 1940 until June 41. So for 1 year, 1940 half, 1941 half, Britain was, and the British Empire, so India and other territories, I don't know it, or maybe the mean part of the other one of Australia, New Zealand, Canada, Union of South Africa. So Britain was more or less fighting alone. Hitler wanted to invade. We're taking as they say it. Hitler wanted to invade Britain, releasing the threat of it. Hitler wanted to invade Britain, but before sending in troops, Germany needed to control the air. So it happened in Poland, for example, first, and stretch again the leg into the ground a bit, press it again into the ground. It happened in Poland. So first they attacked from the air and they got the air. And they did the same in Denmark, where they established air superiority, and then they could annex Denmark, and that happened also in other countries. And they needed that for Britain. Britain was an island, so they could not just invade without having cleared the air. So an air battle started. The Germans waged an air campaign against Britain, but the British resisted with their fighter planes and eventually won the crucial aerial battle against the Germans, called the Battle of Britain, in the summer of 1940. And now the leg to the outside, the hydraulic carjack, flex foot, and returning the leg up and again down. So that is called the Battle of Britain. That was the period they gonna explain more maybe. So there was fighting around about the air, who controlled the air, and Germany was waging an air campaign against Britain. So they were dropping bombs, and there were the whole air campaign basically. And yes, and the British resisted with their fighter planes and eventually won the battle. So the Battle of Britain was won by Britain, and Germany could not establish air control or air superiority. In the summer of 1940 was it. The most important planes used by the Royal Air Force in the Battle of Britain were the Spitfire and the Hurricane, which were designed and built in Britain. Suddenly we're going into details about what vehicles were used. It's a very important part of vehicles, but it's just, we're going so fast over decades, and now we're talking about what planes it were. So the most important planes used by the Royal Air Force, so the British battles, so the British planes, the Royal Air Force in the Battle of Britain, were the Spitfire and the Hurricane. Now the other leg to the outside, again the hydraulic carjack, and bring the leg up and again down. So the Royal Air Force, the two most important planes were the Spitfire and the Hurricane, which were designed and built in Britain. So they had written here something that the ship industry did not work well during the Great Depression. That was 5-6 years earlier, but the automobile and the plane industry grew in Britain. So both the Spitfire and the Hurricane were produced in Britain. Despite the crucial victory, the German Air Force was able to continue bombing London and other British cities at night. So Germany could not win against the British fighters, but they still continued to attack with bombers onto London and other cities, other crucial cities, other important cities. This was called the Blitz. Coventry was almost totally destroyed and a great deal of damage was done to other cities, especially in the East End of London. So Coventry, I'm going to look it up maybe later where it is, and that was almost totally destroyed, and also in London, the East End, there was much damage done. So Britain won the Battle of Britain, the air war, but war continued. And we're just going into the 1990 stage, 1990 position with both legs and leaning in front. So the British Royal Air Force with the Spitfire and the Hurricane won the Battle of Britain, but the bombing continued. Germany was flying in bombers at night, and they were then dropping bombs, especially on London, East End, and on Coventry, I'm naming here. Despite the destruction, there was a strong national spirit of resistance in the UK. The phrase "the Blitz spirit" is still used today to describe Britons pulling together in the face of adversity. Okay, then we have that. Okay, so the Blitz spirit, because it's in Britain it is called the Blitz, these bombings at night onto London and other cities, and Britain did not, their will was not broken, their national spirit to resist the axis of evil. I'm going to call it that if I don't find it what it is. Axis of power. It was actually axis of power and allies. We could just say axis and then allies. The phrase "the Blitz spirit" is still used today to describe that when Britons are pulling together, when they facing adversity. And to the other side, just 99 position with the legs, and we're going in front. So someone could say if the Britons are pulling together, if there's adversity, so if there's a problematic time or some stressful situations, that the Blitz spirit, as that could be used. Make sure you know the planes used in the Battle of Britain and which part of UK were most affected by the Blitz. Yes, that is very important. Many civilian volunteers and small pleasure and fishing boats from Britain helped the Navy to rescue more than 300,000 men from the beaches around Dunkirk. So these two things are worth pointing out. That the evacuation of Dunkirk, many civilian volunteers did drive in small pleasure and in fishing boats over to Dunkirk, which took a couple of hours. I think we drove multiple times, so I don't know how many boats were. And they rescued 300,000 people from the beaches. And also we should make sure to know the battles used in the Battle of Britain. We have just told two of the British, not of the German side. And which parts of the UK were most affected by the Blitz. We just named two. So we know the two main planes used by the Royal Air Force, so the British troops, these were the Spitfire and the Hurricane. And most affected, they listing here, Coventry and the East End of London. And now we're going to the butterfly stretch. We're taking the soles of the feet together, we're sitting straight up, and we're leaning a bit in front. And now we're going to have something about Winston Churchill. We're going to do it in its own part, but we can read on here. Yes, that's the same time. At the same time as defending Britain, the British military was fighting the Axis. The British military was fighting the Axis on many other fronts. It was not really necessary to make that sentence structured like that. So the British military was not just defending Britain, but also many other parts of the world. The British military was fighting against the Axis, so against Germany, Japan, and Italy, basically. But in Singapore, the Japanese, and again, no word map, I have one where I'm going to take it later. In Singapore, the Japanese defeated the British and then occupied Burma, threatening India. Okay. In Singapore, the Japanese defeated the British. So the British were defending Singapore, I'm reading from that. But the Japanese, the Empire of, was it Empire? Empire of Japan, defeated the British in there and then occupied Burma. So the Japanese defeated the British troops fighting in Singapore, and then the Japanese occupied Burma, and that threatened India. The United States entered the war when Japanese bombed its naval base at Pearl Harbor in 1941. So the Japanese attacked the United States in Pearl Harbor on the 7th December 1941. Pearl Harbor is in the middle of the Pacific. That's on Hawaii. So I don't have a word of here. Hawaii is a couple of islands right in the middle of the Pacific, and there is a very huge U.S. Navy base, and that's in Pearl Harbor. And that's just referred with Pearl Harbor. And there were many, many ships of the United States, and the Japanese attacked them, and that brought the United States into the war. I thank you very much, and until next time.